Good morning, teachers, Wodonga Senior Secondary College staff and students. I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in where we gather today, the Dudra people, and pay my respect to elders past, present and any emerging that may be among us. Our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander elders have acknowledged and welcomed people onto country for thousands of years. And when doing this, they would say, walk softly on country. Be mindful and respectful on country. Listen to the water and the land as they hold the stories of our ancestors. Look after the land and the waterways, and the land and the waterways will in turn look after you. My name is Trish. I'm a Gamilaroi woman from Walgett in New South Wales. I arrived in Albury in my early teens as part of the resettlement program. I'm the local Aboriginal Education Consultative Group chairperson. So between 1910 and the 1970s, many First Nations children were forcibly removed from their families, and this was because of a variety of government policies. The generations of children removed under these policies became known as the Stolen Generation. The forcible removal of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children from their families was part of the policy of assimilation, which was based on the misguided assumption that the lives of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people would be improved if we become part of white society. These stolen generations were raised on missions by foster parents, totally cut off from their Aboriginality. Many were stripped of their names and called by a number. And if caught speaking in their Aboriginal language, the only language that they knew, they were punished. By 1911, every mainland state and territory had introduced protection policies that subjected Aboriginal people to near total control and denied them basic human rights such as freedom to move about, custody of their own children, and control over their personal property. My nan called these the years of shame. Our grandparents form a really important part of our lives. My nan lived with us in Humpies on the outskirts of Yenda, a very small place near Griffith. Her country was in Meningie in Queensland. She was removed as part of the Stolen Generation and resettled under the resettlement program. My nan told me stories every day of how she wished that she could see her mother and father again. And she told me stories of how they would run and play. And while she did this, tears filled her eyes. I could never understand it. Nan told me of one of her sisters who was stolen and never to this day came home. Nan spoke of her sister's golden hair and how she would brush it with a turtle comb that her mother had made. And in doing this, she would say, I do hope one day she comes home, but she never did. Another story Nan told me was the story of the Kurrajong tree and its beautiful flowers. I asked Nan one day what the flowers smelt like, and she said, like home. Nan said by remembering her childhood culture that it was the only way that she could stay connected to her country. So on February the 13th, 2008, Mr Kevin Rudd moved a motion of apology to Aboriginal Australians. His apology was a formal apology on behalf of the successive parliaments and governments whose policies and laws inflicted profound grief, suffering and loss on our First Nations people. I stood in QE2 Square on that day with my elders, my family and my community. We all stood in that silent moment and we were so proud to hear those words. We are sorry. But in that still silent moment, tears still flowed. Stories became realities. Realities of lost family, lost time, lost land, lost culture, lost identity, and the basic loss of human dignity. Even today, as I stand here and talk to you, Aboriginal people are still searching for lost family, Children are still being removed. We are still saddened as to why we were regarded as flora and fauna, not entitled to basic human rights like a house, a bed and water. So Kevin Rudd made the first step in acknowledging the wrongdoings of past governments' oppression policies. We, as Australians, and you all as young people, need to move forward so as to ensure that the wrongs of the past never happen again. And as I often say, I look around here today and I do not believe that anybody here is responsible for past governments' doings. But I do, however, believe that we are all responsible to ensure it never happens again. Thank you.